Dear colleagues, I have the honor to present our second presenter. This is Miss Larysa Kysliuk. She is the Doctor of Philological Sciences and the Senior Scientific Researcher in the Ukrainian Institute of the Ukrainian Language. She works in the Lexicological and Lexicographical Department and Structural Mathematical Linguistics, and she is interested in the vocabulary of the modern Ukrainian language. Today, she's talking about the impact of war on the linguistic activities of the Ukrainian community and the Ukrainian language system. Thank you very much, dear colleagues, for such an opportunity to speak here. Again, let me remind you and congratulate you on the Day of the Native Language. And thank you, colleagues from the Indiana University, for this possibility to do this research and for the possibility of such communication during our workshops. Now I'm going to share my presentation. I hope you all see it. So the topic of the project was chosen based on my previous experience in the department and my previous experience of describing changes in the vocabulary and word formation of the modern Ukrainian language. From my analysis of the trends in the development of vocabulary and ways and means of updating it in the language. Here you see the covers. First is the collective monograph, Dynamic Processes in the Modern Ukrainian Lexicon. And I am the co-author here. These are my teachers, Professor Klimenko and Professor Karpilovska. And here in this textbook, we were talking about different innovative processes in the Ukrainian lexicon of the period of independence, and we were giving the scientific background for their consequences. Next is the dictionary, Active Resources of Modern Ukrainian Nomination. It's also published by the group of scientists. And we present here new words and combinations and describe their formal, semantic, and functional properties, which illustrate the tendencies of normalization of new nominations in the language. And the next one is the monograph, Modern Ukrainian Formation Nomination, Resources and Development Trends. We show here those parts of the lexical and word formation subsystems that show stable activity or demonstrate dynamics in response to changes in the life of Ukrainian society. And the last book, it's also the collective work, The Impact of Social Change on the Development of the Ukrainian Language, where we use modern texts and identify the renewal of the composition of certain thematic groups of words as the response of the language to changes in the society. And we model the real state of mobile parts of the lexicon and grammatical system of the Ukrainian language that deserve to be studied and presented in normative dictionaries. These works use systematic and structural analysis of the forms, semantics, and functional properties of the new vocabulary. And this research methodology is used in the proposed project. The source base. So the sources were chosen the text from electronic media, information channels on Telegram, Facebook, and Telegram, fiction texts from 2022 and early 2023. So it's after the full-scale invasion. Screenshots from the analyzed sources. You can see them further on in the presentation, but this slide shows some of the fiction publications that have already been published during the full-scale invasion. These are like testimonies which, according to Irina Boris Levontina, show like good witnesses of the time in which we live. We have a lot of such publications, and according to the literary critic Hanna Uliura, significant proportion of them are written immediately for export. Collections of essays, poetry, anthologies, binders of war diaries are published in English, German, and French. These are natural processes. Such books are created in an attempt to explain to people from outside what the Great War in Ukraine is, and because of the desire to satisfy interest in a hot topic. Here you can see the titles of the electronic texts from the online anthology of martial law. You can see here the link to it. It is accessible, and of some paper publications published in Ukrainian and in translations. For example, February 2022, testimony of the first days of the invasion. After the 24th, children of air alerts. After the occupation. And the genres are different. These are news, reels, essays, poetry, so which indicates that when such events happen, the reporters, essay writers, and poets will be the first to pass those moments, historical moments and emotions to further generations. Here we see the dynamics in the lexicon, was that with the beginning of the full-scale invasion, we saw like centripetal, centrifugal movement of certain thematic groups of vocabulary. Ukrainian society stopped discussing COVID, and military vocabulary appeared in the focus of their attention. Checkpoints, shelling, air raid, cruise missile, rocket artillery, missile strike, occupation, war crime. These are just some examples of the names of the realities that became part of the Ukrainian life. The names of the armed forces, heroes defenders of Ukraine, glorious sons and daughters of Ukraine, our soldiers. It reflects the full range of feelings which the Ukrainians have to their defenders. Names of weapons, mortar, howitzer, drone, night vision scope, thermal imager, abbreviations, air defense system, UAV, they have become part of our everyday vocabulary. And finally, the names we give to the enemies, which is the largest thematic groups, which contains, in addition to those presented on the website, quite a lot of expressive new words, including obscenities. Studying the peculiarities of language dynamics is also of social political importance, as the development of the language reflects the state and development of society, reveals changes in its cognitive consciousness and worldview. 6 months ago, when the project began, I expected that recreating the semantic space of the Russian-Ukrainian war would also provide a certain understanding of this war by the Ukrainian society. A study of the text made me realize that while the war is going, Ukrainian society is not ready to comprehend it in a quite detached and emotionless way. In order to comprehend the experience, we must live through it. Therefore, some topics in society are subject to some unspoken taboo for discussion. The topic of different experiences of living through the war. Ukrainians who are fighting, people in Ukraine, people abroad. So this living through the active trauma is impossible to be discussed on Facebook because it is impossible to appeal to logics when there is so much pain in us. There is such concept in psychology as trauma verbalization. Trauma in Greek means wound, injury, result of violence. Psychologists have found that trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder disable Broca's area, one of the language centers in the brain that allows people to verbalize their experience. And that is why people cannot talk about traumatic experience for a long time. The quotes on the slide first is from the speech of the Ukrainian scientist Igor Kozlovsky, who spent 2 years in captivity. So the speech was called Traumas of the Past and Security of the Future, and published statements are, you can see them in Zbruch public edition. And next is the citation from the interview with the writer Sofia Andrukovich. And the verbs I highlighted here are verbalize, talk, describe, emphasize. So it's like really to describe deeply the events of such scale, we must really distance ourselves from these events, and we are not ready to that. We are in the center of these events. So these verbs emphasize the importance of putting into words this this trauma, and this stage is yet to see. At the same time, transformation of trauma into experience is already happening in the society through social and creative intelligence, through our helping others, helping the armed forces, through art and literature, as a creative use of separated experience, and through collective folk art.
The material on this slide confirms the verbalization of war trauma is in progress, and this process will take a long time. You may see the fragments of text on Facebook posted by public figures. Journalist and ethnopsychology researcher Kysliuk emphasizes in her Facebook post called Reflecting on the War, stresses that the war has been going on almost a year, but I haven't even talked it through yet. And she does. I'm most afraid of leaving Ukraine. God, I want to live only here on my land, to develop and enrich it, to be at home. A similar post by the poet and translator Hanlina Krug writes, being here with your own people as it turned out in practice is more important than being saved. Or you may see the words from a published story by Oksana Lutsenko, which calls The Way Home, The Way to Anxiety, Why I Returned to Ukraine with My Child from the United States. Here is a quote. I finally had the formulation of the non-obvious thing that keeps me here. It's the importance of living through shared pain here and now. It is the feeling that real life is here. All these texts indicate that at least some Ukrainians are beginning to verbalize this experience. The next slide shows the spectrum of active wartime vocabulary from fragments of Pavlo Korobchuk's poems, highlighted in bold. And from and some examples from social medias, Facebook and Telegram. Well, what can we say? Expressive new words. Orkostan, orkoznawstwo, Pushkinist, derussifications, and occasionalisms. At this stage, when the war is still ongoing, they become actively used. See it both in poetry and in spoken language. At the stage when the war is still ongoing, it's important to record this new phenomena in the language activity of Ukrainians, which are reflected primarily at the lexical level of the language system. We observe the emergence of new words by analogy with Holodomor, like something similar to Holodomor, development of known words and I'm sorry, an emergence of neo-Semitism, such as arrival hit. The whole country is red. So what does it mean? You may say it. It means the air raid signal. Expressive vocabulary, the emergence of new phraseology. I will talk about it more detail later. At a morphological level, language, its emergence of new derivatives and word formation nests from new and activated lexemes, as well as phenomena related to violations of stylistic and spelling norms, such as lowercase spelling of proper names related to the aggressor country, use of profanities. All these phenomena will require deeper reflection over a longer period of time. Naturally, the key word in the group of military vocabulary, not only for the current moment, but obviously for the future of Ukrainian state, is the abbreviation AFU, Armed Forces of Ukraine. According to information provided by Maria Shvedova, the developer of the General Originally Annotated Corpus of the Ukrainian language, the community that annually selects the keywords for the new corpus chose the word IFU as a keyword for 2022. The high trust of Ukrainian society in the armed forces and Commander-in-Chief Valery Zaluzhny is also evidenced by the large number of memes and quotes in the informational space, such as the words by Zaluzhny, at the cost of the lives of the best, we are fighting for the right to speak our native language, to be Ukrainians, to determine our future. Ukrainian is the language of our parents and children, the language of our victory. I think these words really deserve to become a part of dictionaries and textbooks and other literature. Neo-Semitism's word is known form but immune meaning. In military slang, most often arises as a result of metaphorization based on external similarities or borrowings. For example, word bavovna, which literally means cotton, in the sense of an explosion on Russian occupied or Russian territory. This neo-Semitism arose from an imperfect automatic translation from Russian into Ukrainian, as Russian propaganda called such explosions chlapkami, claps, while the machine translator translated it because these words with two variants options of emphasis, it translated it as a cotton, as bavovna, cotton. And so in Ukrainian land community and in the media, this caused many memes and phrases such as cotton is heard and powerful high precision cotton. Now, there is another neo-Semitism base. We believe it says it has English origin, a positive assessment of something, approval of certain actions, expressions, or a line of thinking. Or during the war, it's also added of anti-Russian positive assessment. For example, the explosions of ammunition depots near Donetsk after the HIMARS hit our base. The opposite for base is cringe, which denotes something negative and very unpleasant. Grad. It's It's the name of multiple rocket launching system. A scooter. It means an Iranian Shahed drone that makes a sound similar to a scooter. 0. Front line, the battlefield, actually 0 kilometers from the front line. Ballistic plates. A flat, usually rectangular piece of armor or steel inside the body armor or plate carrier that protects against bullets and shrapnels. Hit. An impact of combat missiles on a civilian or military facility. And this list can be continued. New meanings that have emerged as a development of the meanings of known words, as certified by normative explanatory dictionaries of the Ukrainian language, are candidates for lexicographic fixation with new meaning and relevant illustrative material. Let's compare the new meanings. You see in the on the left side, and illustration of the lexems cotton, scooter, and hit. And on the right side, you see screenshots of the corresponding dictionary entries from the electronic version of the 11 volumes of Academic Explanatory Dictionary of the Ukrainian language on the right. The formulation of new meanings and illustration to them as modern active vocabulary will also be useful for the work of the Department of Lexicology, Lexicography, and Structural and Mathematical Linguistics, whose faculty currently works on preparation of explanatory dictionary of active for contemporary Ukrainian language. Language creativity, including occasionalism, has a direct connection with the assessment of military events. From the neo-semantic cotton, the occasionalism забавовнений, which cottoned, for example, cottoned Crimea were created, and little cotton bavovnyatko, which is visualized as a fiery animal, where the word formation model works, which is used to form affectionate names for babies. Also, we have some example. Cotton is flirking, cotton is frolicking, cotton is playing. For example, at the Vselsvita website presents the cotton as a new character of modern Ukrainian mythology, a ghost animal it's a quote, quickly comes to Russian bases, warehouse, airfields, oil refineries, and other flammable objects at night, and starts playing with fire. You can see two images of this cotton animal on the left, a neural network generated image, and on the right it's a real toy made in this pattern, which is in demand, and the proceeds from its sale go to the Ukrainian armed forces. This myth creation and word creation is picked up by Facebook commenters on the page of the operational command South. It's a quote. And they also say that the size of cotton is directly proportional to the damage it causes. I'm sorry. In case of large-scale destruction, the cotton grows to the side of the huge cotton creature, which is of significant size and destructive powers. However, it's said in the whispers there is even greater form of cotton, which is cotton wolf. And when a cotton transforms into a cotton wolf, the whole Russia will burn, and it will be impossible to stop this fire. Novelties from different types of weapon indicate ways of destroying the enemy using the corresponding equipment, such as American missile systems, HIMARS, Bayraktar drones, or portable anti-aircraft missile systems, Sink and Javelin, to HIMARS someone, to Bayraktar someone, to Stinger someone, to Javelin something. The stems of the occasional verbs are proper names. You see to Chernobyevka someone to constantly do the same, each time with a disappointing result. From the name of the Chernobyevka airport near Kherson, which was still used every time after it was shelled. The occasional word to 200 someone to destroy the enemy, to make the enemy kill in action. It's formed from the substantive 200, killed, which remained in the language after the Soviet war in Afghanistan, because 200 kilograms was the weight of body in the tin coffin, which was transported by airplanes. Derivatives forms formed by truncating the same artillery, for example, artillery arta, or univerbs, armored vest, armed vest, thermal imager, thermal. Also, they function primarily in the language of the military and volunteers and are common in social media chats. The active linguistic creativity of social media users and naming the defenders of Ukraine is manifested in particular in the creation of modern Cossack nicknames based on models that have been preserved in the number of Ukrainian surnames. In a discussion of one of the posts on Facebook, the author wrote, I was just thinking, how would they sound now? I mean, the Cossack surnames. Kill the drone, Vary cocktail. And of course, the military calls themselves Залужневцы after the name of the commander-in-chief Залужny. Among a number of negative names for the enemies, there are abbreviation like Chmobik, from which means partially mobilized Russian recruit, Chmonia, which means poorly uniformed, clumsy mobilized Russian army, occasionalism, скрепоносцы, formed according to the negative model of creative complex words like flag bearer, arms bearer. The occasionalism is emphasized by the use of the abbreviated compound spiritual staples as an ideological guideline of Russia, which means traditional values of Putinism, and as part of militant Russian ideology, used as an ideological basis for Russian military aggression. In Russian words, the скрепоносцы are ideological enemies of Ukraine.
Some popular names of foreign weapons have been adapted in Ukraine. For instance, American HIMARS is called chimeras. Javelins have become javelinas. So we also have some word formation nests here. For example, from HIMARS, we have two HIMARS, two javelin, and they motivate the prefix type verbs like to additionally HIMARS, to additionally javelin. And also we see here the diminutive names in the language from HIMARS systems, where we see these words appear as different parts of speech in compound sentences. And the popularity of these types of weapons, it also presented in such Christmas presentations, decorations. Is there a violation of spelling norms in the low-case spelling of Russia, Moscow? The national platform of Всеосвіта published a post by Alexander Avramenko, the developer of the Ukrainian language tests, who suggested to use like the spirit, to heighten the spirit of people, to allow use the lowercase letters in writing the aggressor country names. And the Ministry of Culture and Information Policy of Ukraine supported this idea and published new informal rules of Ukrainian spelling according to which it is possible to write Russia, Kremlin, and Putin with a lowercase letter, and it is not considered a spelling error. Electronic Grammar Dictionary Vesum quickly responded to the changes in spelling practices. So here you can see it in Maria Shvedova posts, and it indicates that Russia is already recognized as a geographical name in an alternative spelling, not under the current spelling. The alternative means here is indicated by this tag alt. This is done primarily to recognize such names in texts. Part of the information war, Ukrainians consider a ban on Facebook for using the words Moskali or the phrase genocide of Russia against Ukrainian as hate speech. The existence of what cannot be called causes this double standard approach, and it leads to different ways of application of graphical derivation to denote offensive names of the enemy to avoid such a ban. Here you can see examples of such designations. We can just use like G instead of genocide, or we use the Latin letters in Ukrainian words. The presentation of this obscene vocabulary in social networks is also in the form of puzzles, and their decipherment using capital letters. So you can see here the example of it. So when you decipher it, you have these words. Social media is actively debating the acceptability and appropriateness of obscene vocabulary during the war. One of such opinions expressed during the discussion is presented here on the slide. If there is a certain layer of vocabulary in the language, it denotes or expresses something important. There are no bad words, there are appropriate and inappropriate words. The use of profanity is mostly seen as a reaction to the aggressive environment that Ukrainian defenders successfully neutralize. In my opinion, the violation of stylistic and spelling norms, using lowercase for proper names, referring to the aggressor country, or use of profanity, is also indication of verbalization of the trauma of war by native speakers and even an attempt to overcome it. For example, here you can see the cover of the book, which title in the Ukrainian language is not possible to say, but it was published as the charity project to support the army. The book contains the stories of 67 authors, their reflections on the war, and it was published to raise funds for the armed forces. You cannot see it in free access. There are some, it's sold through the auctions. The acronym IPSO, Information and Psychological Operation, has become a marker of the information war in Ukraine, and one of these operations was, and still is, creation of blackout for the civilian population of Ukraine as a result of shelling of energy infrastructure and provocations aimed at inciting Ukrainians to protest against the government. The Center for Counter and Disinformation at the National Security Defense Council of Ukraine even issues warnings about the manipulations of blackouts in Ukraine by Russia. One of the reasons for the failure of the IPSOR was the use of an automatic translator. It does not remove interlingual homonymy. For example, the word svet it can has two words in Ukrainian language. Or, for example, this automatic translation violates the stress of the word, and it can be transferred through the other word in the Ukrainian language. For example, the Russian phrase "нет мочи терпеть" will be represented in Ukrainian like "we have no strength to go through it," but the word was transformed or perceived in a different way, and as the result, you get a completely different phrase. So instead of the phrase "we cannot suffer this hell anymore," the social network showed completely different translations which have quite a funny meaning. So, and the effect was completely opposite to the expected result of the Russians. So here you can see the examples of such sentences, how people change or transform these sentences in the Ukrainian language. The symbolism of the war as one of the most difficult periods in the modern history of Ukraine is rich and varied. And Ukrainians create different symbols of fight, from this ceramic cockerel figurine that miraculously survived in a destroyed house in Borodyanka to a can of tomatoes that was used to shoot down an Iranian drone. Symbol always evokes certain emotional associations, and this feeling of home for people in different countries, it's like constant, stable symbol. So here, these pictures of destroyed houses in Borodyanka and Dnipro, they strike with their fragility, and they were so movingly conveyed by the poet Katerina Kalitko, who says, "It looks like a doll's house. We used to play with it. Tiny furniture and sets, curtains made of a piece of dress, candy foil tiles, plasticine balls of apples." And the drawing by the Polish artist accurately conveys the feelings of Ukrainian refugees. The writer Ostap Svilinsky formulated it as follows: "Home is something that should protect us. It is something that should protect us, but it turns out to be so unprotected in times of war. It is a place where we should feel safe, and in this sense, the war makes us all homeless." I think that the concept of home and its lexical content in the context of war will still be comprehended by linguists.
Another stream of linguistic creativity in time of threat to life and existence of the nation and is the state of appeal to national identity, to historical archetypical images. Mount Shikavitsa has become such a symbol, turned into a meme. Let me remind you that, so this is probably well known to everyone, that Mount Shikavitsa in Kiev above Podil has historical significance, as it has been known since the founding of Kiev, at least since the 5th century, as it mentioned in the legend of the tale of bygone years, and it's named after Shchek, one of the brothers who founded Kiev. So Shikavitsa was called back in the era of Monomach. It was called this way in the 18th century and is called that way now. The prophetic Oleg is buried on the mountain itself, as mentioned, as also mentioned in the tale of bygone years, and they buried him on the mountain called Shikavitsa. His grave is still here today. That grave is called Oleg's grave. In September 2022, after Putin's threats of a nuclear strike, the meme "an orgy on Shikavitsa" as during nuclear strike spread among Kiev-based citizens as a sarcastic humor. You may see some of these memes on this slide. After this is kind of sarcastic, dark humor. After that, Ukrainians from other cities also began to unite and now around their landmarks. One of the most popular verses was a rendition of the famous song attributed to the legendary Marusia Churai. Oh, don't go, Grits. It's shown on the slide. Oh, don't go, Grits to Shikavice. There is nothing to see on Shikavice, no fairies will come to the orgy, only three nerds will come there and they'll come to get drunk. So you see, it's very spoken communicative version. In early February 22, when enemy sabotage and reconnaissance group began to be detected, uh, the word palanitsa, which means a lot of bread, has become a verification code word or shibboleth, and it became a mem symbol and language press word. So special people were forced to pronounce it in Ukrainian to distinguish Russian military from Ukrainians. Probably philologists and native Ukrainian native speakers know that the word palanitsa is difficult for foreigners, particularly Russians, due to phonetic peculiarities of the Ukrainian language, where ts sound can be pronounced both hard as in the word sonce and soft as in the word kazatsky. So we pronounce this sound softly at the end of the word, while in Russian language, the word se in this position is always hard. After a number of Russians pronounce the word polunitsa, which means strawberry, instead of palanitsa, which means bread. It became a meme on social media. Ukrainians began suggesting other Ukrainian words that were difficult for pronounce as a linguistic password to detect enemy saboteurs. You may see these words here. Вештатися, духмяний, непереливки, кмітливий, etc. Or even tongue-in-cheek, like they also offered witty and seemingly innocuous questions to answer, or the answer to which were supposed to reveal knowledge of the school curriculum in Ukrainian region. When do oxen roar? We know the answer. Or knowledge of the lyrics of popular Ukrainian songs. What do dead bees do? The answer, they don't hum. For a linguist, memes are a confirmation of the emergence of the stable compound in the language, and thus the need to describe such compounds and interpretations. The tractor troops appeared when the first shock passed and the peasants joined the territorial defense fighters in stealing abandoned but not burnt enemy military equipment for the needs of the Ukrainian army. Thus, the tractor troops have become a mimetic subspecies of the armed forces of Ukraine, whose main task was to take military equipment from the enemy in the best possible condition for the armed forces. Humorous memes about Ukrainian combat birds appeared after the Russian media reported that a flock of geese had shot down a Russian fighter jet in the Kherson region. During the war, Ukrainian phraseology was replenished with transformed and new phraseologies. The phraseology "My house is on the edge" was extended. My house is on the edge, so I meet the enemy first. During the blackout, the humorous 11th commandment appeared. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's light. Since the Russians tried to disguise any military defeats in the war with linguistic euphemisms, where there was supposed to be a retreat due to defeat, in the text of the Russian media they wrote a show of gesture of goodwill, which was played up in the Ukrainian media, examples of which you may see. So in 3 days, to set unrealistic plans and sincerely believe in their success, based on Russia's plan to capture Kiev in 3 days, announced in February 2022. The phrase "to follow the Russian ship" in the direction of the Russian or in the direction of the Russian warship originated from the response of Ukrainian soldiers deployed on the Snake Island to the Russian cruiser Moskva to the offer to surrender. The bold answer became one of the symbols of the fight against the Russian invaders, but it contained a swear word, so the media used its transformations. You may see a lot of examples here. Russian banks have been given 30 days to follow the Russian ships. Let them go in the direction of the Russian warship. Dozens of invaders have already followed the Russian warship. And get a ticket to Kobzon's concert as an aphorism and euphemism for the death of Russian soldiers, as a symbolic joining of the late Russian singer Joseph Kobzon, emerged in 2018 after assassination of the DPL leader Zakharchenko, which took place the day after Kobzon's death. Language has become not only a marker of national identity, but also a search for a pillar, a deep force that nourishes the nation, including through creativity. As an example, allusions are made to the excerpt from and memes from Taras Shevchenko poem Dream. So we remember it's dawn, the edge of the sky is burning, a nightingale in the grove meets the sun. The artillery in the dark grove meets the orcs. And there's a reference to the stories Night Before Christmas by Mykola Gogol from the cycle Evenings on a Farm near Dikanka. The Ukrainian folk songs, or There Are Two Oaks on the Mountains. We see that there is iron defense on the mountain. Then there are allusions to the song What a Moonlight Starry Clear Night. You can see even if everything you may collect needles. Written by Mikhailo Staritsky and Mykola Lysenko, and the song Magic Violin. A white-winged bird sings in a tree by Yulia Rybchinsky and Igor Pokland. Appealing to the deep archetypes of culture through folk art. Carol, Kolomikas, incantations. A famous example, Air Raid, Go to Taganrog, and the continuation. An example of such spontaneous creativity was a Facebook post by poet Lyudmila Khorova, author of the lyrics to the songs the enemy will face the faces, which says, where she started a collective creativity session with a spell. Whoever comes at us with a sword, we will bake them in a cauldron. This is an allusion to a cauldron, which in military terms means complete encirclement of enemy troops. So here we have few answers in the comments. Whoever fires missiles at us will come to home in the bags. Also contain words that have quite additional meaning during the war, because 45,000 black body bags were ordered by the invaders for Ukrainians they were going to annihilate. But these bags have become a symbol of the enemy's own losses. Christmas carols are the attribute of Ukrainian Christmas celebrations. This year, military Christmas came at a time when there was a threat of blackout in Ukraine, which became the main theme for children's Christmas greetings, for which the host traditionally gives the young children sweets or small money. This year, the carolers humorously asked to charge their gadget and help Ukrainian armed forces with donations. Give a little charge and 30 hryvnias to Pritula. Here's a whole collection of such carols.
Ukrainians have a long tradition of laughter. Remember Kotlяревsky Aeneid, or the picture of Ilya Repin, where Cossacks are writing the letter to the Turkish Sultan, which they also emerged during the war. In the fault, despite the threat of a possible cold, humor was added to social media chats, and Ukrainians joked about Google searches, how to shoot down a drone at home, how to shoot down a missile using home means. And compared to the situation at the end of February, appeal to Ukrainians of February 24, do not panic, do not spread fakes, do not create traffic jams, do not interfere with the military, and appeal to Ukrainians on October 17th, do not shoot down Iranian drones yourself. The blackouts caused humorous interpretation of the words, understandable to people who stayed in big cities and lived in high-rise buildings for a long time without electricity. That means without all benefits of civilization. And here you have the words, the content of the words here, such as anger, envy, pride, greed, lust. For example, anger. The neighbor has electricity for 2 days in a row. Envy. Your neighbor also has no electricity, but he has a generator. Despondency. You're waiting for the elevator to turn on so you don't have to walk to the 5th floor. And here is a meme with a humorous transformation of the famous phrase from the TV weather forecast Mikola na Pogoda. Don't let problems and troubles make your life bad, where problems and troubles have been witly replaced with shaheeds and bad weather. And just yesterday, the media and social networks exploded with the memes dedicated to this incredible event, the arrival of US President Joe Biden in Ukraine for the first time in 15 years, which is a manifestation of not only powerful US military assistance in our fight against the enemy, but also a sign of personal support. Most of the memes are about Biden, who allegedly visited Ukrainians' favorite supermarkets, fast food places, and Subway. And here is a meme illustrating the signing by the US president of a package additionally support Ukraine for $40 billion in May 2020. And Repin's painting, which depicts Joe Biden as the central figure among the Cossacks, who are writing the letter to the Turkish Sultan. So, the most vividly we see the living through the trauma of war in the occasional word formation. In lessons to avoid crying, I was laughing, we have this life-giving Ukrainian laughing culture, which is one of the ways to overcome the trauma of war, which is expressed in the offensive names of enemies, in violation of spelling norms, and the use of obscene vocabulary. So the work on the project and the collection of material is still going on, because, to quote the Ukrainian poet Natalia Pozniak-Homenko, this year Ukraine took off its wreath and put on a helmet and armor. But the powerful support and assistance of the United States and European allies, as well as the photo of the US president against the background of the golden domes of St. Michael's Cathedral in Kiev on February 20, 2023, give us confidence in victory. Thank you for your attention. I hope I didn't use more of the time which was allocated to me. Thank you, Ms. Larysa, for such interesting and deep presentation. It was very interesting to listen to you and learn about your research. Dear colleagues, if you have questions. Yeah, can we start? Yes, please. First of all, I wanted to give my big gratitude to Ms. Larysa, because it's a burning topic. We were all involved in listening. I understand that we all agree here. It's very important topic, and it's up to the point how we trace it, how we see these reflections. But I have some questions here. Maybe not all of them, but I will try to ask at least some of them, and you will choose. So first of all, the question, how did you identify the segment of the space which you were monitoring in the networks? What was the basis for your analysis? Which kind of texts? Why I am asking it? I also trace and monitor a lot of information, and sometimes I feel you can take it from here, you can illustrate it from here, but when we talk about scientific research, we need to show the sources. This is the first question. And the second, you were talking about the keywords which define our current moment. The words which are symbols of fighting. Did you analyze for yourself? Did you notice some trends in changes in the words, which in your opinion are symbols to identify Ukrainians for themselves? So for their identity, you were talking Polyanica. So this is like a marker of our people and enemy. So are there words which identify us as such? So I'm talking about some linguistic picture for the Ukrainians. Is it changing now with the war? Maybe you were not researching it in particular, but maybe you can monitor, you can see such tendencies. And the third question is about folk art, about the saints which we use. How can be explained in such pragmatic conditions, or maybe such technologized environment, such tendency to create myths? Why do we still have it? We can talk about a lot of things here, about the creative work of the authors of 19th century and the Cossacks, but still it is living in us. How can you explain it? Thank you beforehand. Thank you for your questions. I was listening to your questions, and for me, the third question is actually the answer to the second question. So what I want to say, these deep archetypes, national archetypes, which were born in the creativity of our people, in mythology. And then why Shevchenko is so popular now? Maybe because from the Revolution of Dignity until now, yeah, maybe for the conference I will be presenting my research on this topic. He was also the protector of those symbols and senses. And for me, it's kind of a tendency. I cannot say that there is some special symbol, but it's quite clear that with the times where we have a threat to the nation, to the people, to the state, and our rescue from that, or the ways to rescue ourselves, goes from our roots. Maybe those roots are not now stable. Yes, as you saw it in the picture, which symbolizes our house, we will still be having it in us. It's our culture, it's our language. Everything of that creates our national identity. And for today, for us, it is our language. And what about selecting the material? You know, the question is not like complicated for me, but I was planning that I will take some texts of three styles: publications, oral speech, and some literature, because I expected to see the texts of these styles, like the first reaction of people, it's not a novel, it's not scientific research, so this must be some first-hand sources, and I was choosing by the style, and the second step was the language of such sources. I thought that must be Ukrainian native speakers, and these are not just random texts, these are not random people. So if to talk about social networks, they are in public access, it's not a violation of private rights, it's all open sources. And to add more here, styles, the language of these texts, and I don't know if I can say it in words here, maybe our trust in the texts. So they should have some authority. This media should be respected by people, like the newspaper Den, for example, which has the journalists of high level. If to talk about publications, and if we talk about literature, so this is everything that is being published now. But we also evaluate such sources because the critics say there will be a lot of different texts published now. More of them were published with commercial purpose, but they serve their aim. But we put some value into the text. We choose, we need this value, and the literature critics, what is their opinion about the text is also certain type of marker for us. And the third direction of texts is our oral speech. It is clear that we can have only some electronic sources and networks. And first of all, I was interested with this circle, this bubble, which is composed of educated, intelligent people of the Ukrainian society who are looking for something and who are looking for the answers to the questions which they ask themselves. These are volunteers, scientists, writers. These are yesterday's people with high education, historians, people from IT. Maybe we will still need to put it into the words, because the text selection was situational. For example, today you want to use this word, to record it. Maybe tomorrow you will be filter it, and you will filter the text for qualities. What will be saved in our history, what will actually disappear, which will be the text of the day. Thank you very much. It's really important.
It was very important to hear, especially regarding connotations, because I have some of my ideas. I will speak about them at the upcoming conference, and it was very important for me to hear your expert opinion. Well, I don't suppose so to test some of my assumptions. Thank you, Ms. Tatiana, for questions. Thank you, Ms. Larysa, for very detailed response and for wonderful presentation. I think we will be able to continue our discussion at the conference, at the Taras Shevchenko conference. Us and Larysa will present, me and Larysa and me will present there. And I'm glad to invite all our colleagues to take part in this conference, which will take part on March 23rd, 24th, and 25th. Once again, thank you, dear colleagues. Congratulations with the Mother Language Day. And hold on, take care of yourself. Wish you all good, warm, light evening. Thank you.
Всім дуже приємно всіх було бачити. Спасибі.
Дякую, гарно, на все добре.
Побачення, дякую.
Побачення, дякую. Спасибі.